Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at a stack of sources that, I have to be honest with you, actually made me a little anxious when I first started reading through them.
Anxious. That is not usually the vibe we go for on this show. What set that off?
It's the context. We're looking at the workforce. And usually when people talk about the future of work, it's this vague, distant sci-fi concept.
Yeah.
You know, flying cars and robot butlers.
Right.
But the material we're covering today, specifically this workbook by Steve Diasio and Zoe Peters, it frames the current moment as a crisis. A silent one, but a crisis nonetheless.
It is a crisis, but it's the kind that creeps up on you, which, makes it dangerous. The sources make it very clear. The old playbook, go to school, get the degree, get the entry-level job, climb the ladder.
For 40 years, yeah.
That's broken. It's not just cracked. The bottom rungs have been, they've been sawed off.
Exactly. The text points out that the jobs typically reserved for entry-level candidates are just disappearing into automation and AI. So the question that kept nagging me as I read was, if the ladder is broken, how do you climb?
What's the skill?
What is the one skill that actually future-proofs you?
And the answer provided here is fascinating because it's not learn to code and it's not get an MBA.
Yeah.
According to the World Economic Forum, and this is heavily emphasized in the guide, the #1 survival skill for 2023 and beyond is creative thinking.
And that is exactly where a lot of people tune out. Because they think, well, I'm not a painter, I'm not a musician, I'm an accountant, or...
I'm a project manager,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is exactly the misconception this workbook is designed to dismantle. We are not talking about artistic talent. We aren't talking about being able to draw a realistic horse. We are talking about cognitive agility.
The ability to solve problems that don't have a textbook answer.
That's it.
So to get us there, we are diving into this guide titled Evaluating Your Creativity, Building Your 21st Century Skills Through Assessment and Evaluation. It's technically a workbook, but reading through it, it felt more like a diagnostic or a boot camp.
That's the perfect word for it, and the authors actually frame it that way. They call this process a creativity audit.
Which sounds intense.
Yeah.
Like the IRS is coming for my imagination.
Well, stick with that metaphor for a second. Think about what a financial audit actually does. It doesn't create money out of thin air. It looks for assets you already have, but maybe you've misplaced or undervalued.
Or lost track of.
Or just lost track of. That is the mission here. The authors argue that you already possess these 21st century skills. You just haven't labeled them correctly.
And because we haven't labeled them, we can't use them strategically.
Precisely. The goal is to move you from passively consuming information, now that's a nice idea, to actively assessing your skills. It's about taking inventory so you can survive that workforce shift we talked about.
Okay, so before we get to the audit part, where we actually look at our lives, we need to define the playing field. The book introduces a framework called the 4 Pillars of Creativity. I found this really helpful because I usually tunnel vision on just one of them.
Most people do. When we say creativity, we almost immediately picture the creative person.
The eccentric genius, the Steve Jobs type, the lone wolf.
Right. That's the first pillar. But the text argues that if you only focus on the person, you miss the ecosystem.
Right. You can be the most creative person in the world, but if you're sitting in a windowless room with a manager who hates change.
Exactly. That brings in the second pillar. The creative environment. This is huge for anyone in leadership listening. Are you building a space that allows for risk? Then you have the creative process, the actual methodology. It's not just waiting for lightning to strike, it's the system you use. And finally, the creative product or service, the tangible outcome.
The insight here that really clicked for me was the interplay. You can't just be creative. You have to engineer the environment and the process to support the person.
It's a multidisciplinary approach, and that's why this isn't just for artists. A scientist needs a creative process to design an experiment. An entrepreneur needs a creative environment to scale a team. It applies to your personal life just as much as your business life.
Okay, so let's get to the audit. As we said, they compare this to a tax audit, which, again, bold choice of metaphor, but let's roll with it.
It's effective, though. In this creativity audit, you are digging through your actual life to find proof of your creative life. You're looking for receipts.
They break it down into 4 buckets where we should look for these receipts.
Yeah.
Educational, professional, social, and recreational.
Correct. And this is where you should really pay attention because you probably don't give yourself enough credit in these areas.
I want to drill down into the educational one first because I think a lot of listeners might feel their education was very rigid. I memorized facts. I took tests.
I filled in bubbles.
Right.
Where's the creativity in that?
Yeah.
That's the surface level. But you have to dig deeper. Did you ever have, say, 3 exams in 1 week while working a part-time job?
Oh, yeah. The panic scheduling.
That panic scheduling is resource management. That
Okay.
is creative problem solving. How did you study? Did you use flashcards? Did you come up with weird acronyms to remember biology terms?
All the time.
Did you form a study group and divide the labor? That is the creative process in action. The audit is about recognizing that you are designing solutions. You just called it surviving the semester.
That's a total reframing. It's looking at the how, not just the what.
Exactly. Now look at the social community category. This one really surprises people. We don't usually think of our social lives as creative acts.
The example of the surprise party in the book stood out to me.
It's a perfect example. I mean, think about the logistics of getting 20 people to a specific location at a specific time without the guest of honor knowing. You're managing information flow to keep the secret. You're coordinating logistics for food and drinks. You're anticipating problems, what if he comes home early, and developing contingency plans.
If you put that on a resume, it's project management and crisis communication. But in our heads, it's just planning drinks.
Precisely. And look at the recreational bucket. Hobbies. Maybe you knit, or you play fantasy football, or you build gaming PCs. You are constantly troubleshooting, learning new systems, and adapting. That is all evidence of the creative person pillar.
And professional's the obvious one, but even there, I think we discount ourselves. We think unless we launched a new product, we weren't creative. But figuring out how to calm down an angry client.
That's emotional intelligence and creative negotiation. The takeaway here is you are already doing the work. The audit is just giving you the vocabulary to take credit for it.
So you stop saying, I'm not creative.
You stop saying I'm not creative and you start asking, how do I apply this muscle to my career?
Okay, so we admit we have the muscle. We've audited ourselves and found some assets. But then we go into a meeting or we sit down to write a proposal and we freeze up. Or worse, we start analyzing everything to death. The text talks about a major barrier here called deferred judgment.
This is arguably the most critical thinking skill mentioned in the entire deep dive. If you take one thing away for your next meeting, let it be this. And they use a legal metaphor again.
They really like their legal and financial metaphors.
They do, but it works. In a court of law, sentencing is deferred until after the trial. You don't walk into the courtroom, look at the defendant, and immediately send him to jail.
You have to hear the evidence.
You have to let the process play out.
But in our brains, we sentence ideas to death immediately.
Instantly. It's the yes, but reflex. Someone says, what if we tried a subscription model? And before the sentence is even finished, you're thinking, too expensive, or client X will hate it, or we tried that 3 years ago.
It feels efficient, though. Isn't that why we do it? To save time?
It feels efficient, but it's actually stifling. It kills the distinct ideas before they can even develop. Deferred judgment is the discipline of pressing pause. It's saying, okay, my instinct is to hate this or find the flaw. I'm going to set that instinct aside for 5 minutes and explore the what if.
It's holding space for the ugly baby.
Yes. Ideally, the baby grows up to be a genius, but you have to give it time to grow. If you can be the person in your company who fosters that space, who stops the shooting down culture, you become incredibly valuable. You become the person who unlocks everyone else's potential.
You're a catalyst.
You're a catalyst, not just a worker.
So we've audited our lives. We're learning to hold our judgment. Now I want to talk about how creativity actually matures, because the sources introduced this concept of the 4C model of creativity. It sounds technical, but it's actually a really cool roadmap.
It's the developmental trajectory. It explains how you go from a beginner to a legend. And it's important because it creates realistic expectations. It all starts with mini C.
Mini C, that's personal, right?
Purely personal. It's the spark of, I understand this. When you learn a new chord on the guitar, or you finally understand how a pivot table works in Excel, it's new to you.
Okay.
It might not be new to the world, but the creative act is the learning.
Then we move to little c.
Little c is everyday creativity. This is where most people live. It's cooking a meal without a recipe. It's fixing the printer with a paperclip. It brings value to others, but it's not changing the world. It's practical.
And I think most people are comfortable there. But the School of Creativity and Innovation, which is the program behind this workbook, they are pushing for the next level. They want to get us to Pro C.
Pro C is the goal. Professional creativity. The definition here is fantastic. Pro C is knowing the domain well enough to be creative within it.
The phrase, knowing the rules well enough to break them, comes to mind.
That's it. You can't disrupt an industry if you don't understand how the industry works. If you just come in flailing, that's not creativity, that's chaos. Pro-C is strategic. It's an expert innovator who knows exactly where the weak points are in the system and applies pressure there.
And just for completion's sake, there is a fourth level, Big C.
The big C, Einstein, Edison, Maya Angelou. Creativity that changes history. The text makes a good point.
Good.
You can't really force Big C. That's a mix of genius, timing, and luck. But you can train for Pro-C.
And if you hit Pro-C, you are employable forever.
That's the idea.
Speaking of employable, I want to talk about the circles.
Well, the 30 circles exercise?
This is the part of the source material that really blew my mind. On the surface, it's just a doodle game. But the analysis, it's a career strategy guide in disguise.
It really is. So for everyone listening, imagine a piece of paper with 30 blank circles on it. You have 3 minutes. Your job is to turn as many of those circles as possible into recognizable objects.
Clocks, faces, pizzas, planets, buttons.
Right. And usually people panic and just draw 30 smiley faces.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the metrics. This test measures 2 things, fluency and flexibility. Fluency is speed. Did you fill all 30? That's volume.
And how does that translate to a career?
In a job search, fluency is the numbers game. It's your ability to generate options. Applying for many positions, reaching out to many contacts, you need high fluency to get your foot in the door.
But fluency alone isn't enough. If you draw 30 smiley faces, you have high fluency but zero flexibility.
Exactly. You're stuck in one category. You're derivative. You're repeating yourself. In a career context, this is the person who applies for the same job title in the same industry over and over again, even though that industry is shrinking.
Oof. Okay, so what is flexibility in this context?
Flexibility is the ability to hop categories. On the paper, it's drawing a planet, then a steering wheel, then a biological cell. In your career, it's looking at your skills, say, communication, and seeing that it applies to sales, it applies to HR, it applies to teaching.
It's pivoting.
It's resilience. If one industry collapses, the flexible candidate moves to another. The fluent candidate just keeps knocking on a locked door.
There was one more layer to the circle exercise that I loved, the rule-breaking aspect.
This is the Pro-C move. Nowhere in the instructions does it say you cannot combine the circles.
But we assume it. We see 30 separate circles, so we assume they must stay separate.
We assume the rules exist, but the creative thinker looks at the paper and draws a bicycle using 2 circles, or a snowman using 3. They break the imaginary boundaries.
And the career application there is, don't just look for a job.
Don't just look for a 9-to-5 because that's the circle you've been given. The workforce is changing. Maybe your career is a combination of circles. Maybe it's a contract role plus a side business. Maybe it's consulting, a portfolio career.
Design your work life. Don't just fill in the bubbles.
That is the essence of Pro-C, knowing the rules of employment well enough to break them and build a career that works for you.
That is incredibly empowering. It shifts the power dynamic from, I hope they hire me, to, how do I want to configure my value?
Which brings us to the final step. You've audited your skills, you've practiced deferring judgment, you've strategized your flexible career. Now you have to sell it.
Personal branding.
But not just make a LinkedIn profile. The workbook asks you to create a style guide.
Which is usually something a massive corporation does. Like Coca-Cola has a style guide. Apple has a style guide.
And you are the CEO of You Inc., so you need one too. It forces you to define 3 things: mission, vision, and values.
I always get mission and vision mixed up.
Think of it this way. Mission is what you do now. I solve complex data problems. Vision is the future state, a world where data empowers decision-making. And values are your non-negotiables: innovation, equity, transparency.
And then they get into the visual stuff. Color theory, typography. I'll be honest, I initially thought, does the font on my resume really matter?
Does it matter if you wear sweatpants to a board meeting?
Fair point.
It's nonverbal communication. The text breaks this down beautifully. Colors have psychological weight. Red signals power, urgency, and confidence. Blue signals trust, logic, and stability.
Green is growth.
Exactly. If you are applying for a serious banking job and your personal brand, your resume, your website is hot pink and Comic Sans,
You're sending a mixed message.
you're saying, I'm fun and chaotic, when the role requires, I'm stable and precise. Serif fonts, the ones with the little feet, say, traditional, sophisticated. Sans serif says, modern, clean.
It's about alignment.
It's about signal clarity. You want the employer or the client to feel who you are before they even read the first bullet point. It's the packaging for that Pro C skill set we just built. It proves you have the 21st century skills because you're applying them to yourself.
So let's zoom out and synthesize this journey we've been on. We started with the scary reality. The job market is shifting, and creativity is the survival skill.
We moved from passive to active. That's the core shift.
We audited our lives and found the hidden creativity in our study habits and party planning. We learned to stop killing ideas with deferred judgment. We mapped our growth to the 4C model, aiming for Pro C, and we learned to package it all up with a style guide.
It's a comprehensive toolkit, but, and this is a big but, we have to be realistic with everyone listening here. This podcast is barely 20 minutes long. The workbook we analyzed is a diagnostic. It is not the cure.
Right. The source material is very clear that this is a course introduction. It's the lead-in.
It's like a personal trainer assessing your fitness level. Now, you have weak glutes and good cardio. Great. You have the data. But you still have to go to the gym to see the change.
The school of creativity and innovation is the gym in this metaphor.
Correct. If you're feeling that spark, that realization that, hey, I'm not just a cog in the machine, I have this little C creativity I can grow, then the next step isn't just to think about it. It's to engage with the actual coursework.
To move from little c to Pro C.
It requires practice. It requires feedback. You can't just read about it.
It's the difference between reading a book on swimming and actually jumping in the pool.
We've shown you the water is fine. We've shown you the stroke mechanics. Now you have to jump.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought, going back to those 30 circles.
Let's do it.
If you close your eyes right now and visualize your career as that sheet of paper, your daily tasks, your resume, your 5-year plan, look at the circles you're drawing.
Are you drawing the same circle over and over again? Are you being derivative? Just doing what the person in the cubicle next to you is doing?
Or are you ready to pick up the pen and connect the circles? Are you ready to break the rules that everyone else is following to build something that is actually distinct?
That's the question that determines whether you just survive the future of work or if you thrive in it.
Huge thanks to the authors, Steve Diasio and Zoe Peters, for this framework. It's a wake-up call that I think we all needed.
Absolutely.
And thanks to you for listening to The Deep Dive. Go find that course, stretch those creative muscles, and we'll see you next time.
Stay creative.